I'm going through my integrated life framework, which is really just my framework for modeling or understanding personal development. And it's 5 concentric circles. And so we started at the very center, which is the self. And then the next circle out is the practices. And so today we're talking about manifestations. And I call it the manifestations because it is simply the way the self shows itself to the world. So, I think of the self as a little bit of a nebulous concept. It's kind of complicated. It's why tools like the Enneagram are helpful to understand it. But the manifest itself, I think, is very easy to decipher. It shows itself to us and to the world by what we do. And so we just need to spend a little time reflecting on that, analyzing what it is and how we feel about it, and look for patterns. So the manifestations are things like your hobbies and interests, what books and movies that you are particularly drawn to, things that kind of define you. It is also our behavior, so how we act in certain situations, how we tend to react, or kind of our default reactions. Now, I talked about the practices, how the practices can modulate or alter how the self shows itself to the world, and that's true. I think that is helpful. But I don't think we can actually be different. We can't, through meditation or whatever, change ourself. And so the manifestations are still going to be how we want to respond to a particular situation. That's going to be unique to me, and it needs to be. And I think that's just part of what self-awareness is understanding who I am and how I show up in a certain situation. And it's going to be different than how other people do. So the manifestations also can be your professional and your career choices, or what you did in school. Now, it's important to not conflate these with your roles. We'll talk about that tomorrow. So don't think about this as like what your title is at your job. Rather, think about it as things you like or don't like, or maybe look for patterns across jobs you've taken, ones you've been drawn to, why you selected a certain field of study, either in school or what you try to learn. Those are all things that I consider part of your manifestations. You might look at your colleagues that have the same title and what makes you different than them in that particular role. So I think thinking about these manifestations, you may discover opportunities for change. I mean, you may discover, having looked back at your manifestations and seen certain patterns, that there are things that you want to start pursuing or doing, or maybe a new hobby you want to pick up. Maybe there's ways you can be more fulfilled at work. And you may also see things that you want to start phasing out of that are not part of yourself. So that's the manifestations. Tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more about roles and continue our dissection or review of the Integrated Life Framework. I appreciate your watching and following along. We'll see you tomorrow.